Welcome, everyone. I am Adesewa Josh, and this is Africa Matters. This week, we focus on the latest peace effort in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Find out how a cultural practice in the Gambia during the holy month of Ramadan is provoking debate, and also track a HIV vaccine trial in Zambia. After several false starts, the East African Community Regional Force says the M23 rebel group has finally begun pulling out from key areas in eastern DRC. The withdrawal comes nearly 2 weeks after a March 30th deadline that was meant to mark the end of hostilities by all armed groups operating in the region. M23 had seized large swathes of territory in North Kivu province since regrouping in late 2021 and was advancing towards Goma, the regional capital. According to the EAC military force spokesperson, at least 15 villages, including Kichanga, Kiseguru, Kibumba, Rumangabo, and Bunagana, a town home to nearly 2 million people and a major stronghold of the rebel group, have all been vacated by M23. But M23 is only one of more than 120 armed groups in the region, which is rich in minerals. Local officials say fighting is ongoing between the Congolese army and M23 rebels. UNICEF says the conflict has forced more than 2,000 schools in North Kivu province to close since January, leaving at least 750,000 school children stranded and more than 1 million people displaced. Meanwhile, life is gradually returning to normal in Sake, one of the towns in the region where a string of attacks in recent months killed dozens of civilians and displaced more than 100,000.
In Sake, life is returning to normal. It makes us very happy to see that there are a lot of people doing business in the market. You see that the cassava vendors are there and a lot of people are returning, so everything is going well here.
Let's hear more from Confidence Isaiah Makhari. He's a senior security analyst at SBM Intelligence. He joins me from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Do we know for sure if M23 is withdrawing from the areas it held before, and how significant is that?
Yeah, so to start with, this is not the first time we're hearing about M23 withdrawing from areas that they previously hold. We saw an agreement between them and the regional peacekeeping force that's led by Kenya about in the early part of this year, I think between December and January, where they said they have withdrawn. But the reason why they went back and resumed attacking Congolese military positions was largely due to what they accused the Congolese military of retaking and occupying areas that they have actually left behind. And in violation of the agreement they had with the East African Fighting Force, which said that those areas will be served as a buffer zone between the Congolese military and the M23 rebels. But in the present circumstances, there is actually little indication to show that they are actually withdrawing, given the intensity of the fighting that is going on now, that I've actually seen more regional members of the EAC introducing more troops on the ground. As to the significance of what is actually going on now, it's not really much, but the key thing to note here is that I think the M23 the M23 issue is coming against in the light of a lot of international distractions for the international community. For in so many ways, it is a forgotten conflict. The United Nations Secretary General was in Africa this week, and he only did a stopover in Somalia. Much of the international geopolitical attention has been focused on the issues between East and West, as the United States and Russia, and as a result, not much has been said in terms of support, moral support, and logistical support for the East Africans, especially on the military side, fighting against the rebels.
Right, Confidence, let me just come in here because you mentioned something very significant, which is the fact that the areas that the M23 claim that they're vacating are now being occupied by the Congolese army, which contradicts the ceasefire agreement. Why do you think the EAC army isn't taking over the areas where M23 rebels are vacating?
Because in the first place, those areas are part of Congolese territory. Most of the fighting has taken place in North Kivu, in Goma, and several other parts.
Yeah, I do understand that those parts are part of the Congolese territory, yes. But the agreement says once M23 moves out, EAC force, military, will occupy the place as part of the agreement. But instead of that joint army of the East African community, it is now the Congolese army that is replacing the M23. That wasn't part of the agreement. Why do you think
Yeah, of course,
the EAC
you could
army
say that.
is left out of this?
Yeah. So here's the fact. International agreements, especially peacekeeping agreements or ceasefire agreements, are not the Hail Mary that many people think. It's not. It doesn't necessarily mean that because both parties have put pen to paper, it definitely means that the other parties or both parties in this instance are going to respect the letters of the treaty. That's simply what we are having right here. That the Congolese army is simply not, according to the M23 rebels, I should add, the Congolese army is not respecting that agreement, and as a result, it has given them a grounds to actually resume the offensive. And although the Congolese government has effectively rejected such claims and have put the resurgence of the fighting against the M23 rebels, and the problem now is even beyond both M23 and the Congolese military, and it largely has to do with how effectual the EAC's fighting force and the regional force has to be. Because we look at the EAC as one big behemoth, we forget often that it's actually a combination of varied interests, with some of them actively sympathetic to Rwanda's claims, with some of them actively sympathetic to a Congolese claim.
If you do ask the EAC military force, they'll tell you that they are acting on the agreements of the political parties of the country. So they're not there to implement their own agenda, but the agenda of the warring factions, of whatever it is has been agreed on the political front. But let me quickly ask you this question. There have been allegations and accusations about the Congolese army's conduct in the area, that they have been committing human rights abuses in the region. These allegations, are they likely to affect the people's trust in the Congolese army to keep them safe in the area?
Before the latest round of fighting started, there were a lot of protests around Goma, effectively playing down the effects of whatever regional security fighting force could do, because many of the protesters actually believe that the fighting presence or the presence of fighting forces from the EAC has not actually done anything to stop M23 rebels. But as regards to the question of the Congolese military's effectiveness in handling the conflict without infringing of civilian rights, I don't actually have that much confidence in that, especially for the residents that are there, testimonies we've had from the residents. But the key thing to note here is that most of the human rights abuses, reports about human rights abuses, have not really focused on what the Congolese military have done. It has focused largely on what the M23 rebels have done. I've read
but now there are reports and accusations saying that actually the Congolese army is also infringing on the rights of the locals there. If this is true, how does that impact on the Congolese army's ability to even take over when the M23 is gone, to protect the people there? Because eventually it is going to boil down to the Congolese army to take care of the people of Congo.
Yeah, it is one thing for the M23 rebels to withdraw. It is another thing for the Congolese army in itself to actually trust the withdrawal process. And I make this point with care, because withdrawing from a particular territory means that the next occupying force, especially if that occupying force that is coming in does not actually take the sanctity of human rights into its fighting context, it's going to try to look for collaborators with the departing force, and this is going to culminate into human rights abuses. So that's exactly one of the key fears that we should actually fear. But as to the importance of these particular reports, damning reports concerning the Congolese military, I actually do think that on the long term, yes, it is going to impact the trust that residents in Eastern Congo is going to have on the military, the Congolese military. But I do not think that for the Congolese military and their partners in the EAC, they actually care that much, especially if they are going to keep getting support from the international community to fight against the M23 rebels. I think for the short term, these particular human rights concerns are going to be on the back burner until they can no longer be ignored by the international community.
Thank you so much, Confidence Isaiah Makari, Senior Security Analyst at SBM Intelligence, for speaking to Africa Matters. Ghana has become the first country to greenlight a malaria vaccine developed by Britain's Oxford University. The World Health Organization estimates that malaria kills nearly 500,000 African children under 5 each year. Children between the age of 5 months to 3 years are eligible to receive the vaccine. Early clinical trials from last year showed that Oxford's R21 vaccine was nearly 80% effective against malaria. The result of a larger ongoing trial involving nearly 5,000 children is expected at the end of the year. Meanwhile, the race to find a vaccine for another major killer on the continent continues. The battle against HIV and AIDS has been a long and tortuous one. In Africa, the hope of success is palpable. Fungisai Maronga reports from Lusaka, Zambia, where an HIV vaccine trial is giving the world renewed hope.
It has been a year since Armitage, a vaccine candidate, received his first dose of the HIV core 006.
When I heard there would be an HIV vaccine, I reminded myself that there is currently no HIV medication. It motivated me to get the vaccine because if we found a cure in the future, many people would be fortunate and live a long life. As a result, I decided to get the vaccine.
The Center for Family Health Research Zambia, one of the consortium's 3 members, was the first clinic in Zambia to administer the HIV Conserve X vaccine, a mosaic vaccine targeting a broad range of HIV-1 variants, making it potentially applicable for HIV strains in any geographical region.
But what's so unique about it is that the concepts it's using is that it's trying to target the highly conserved, functionally conserved region of HIV. Mm-hmm. We all know that HIV mutates. Mutation is where, during its replication process, it changes certain proteins on the HIV or within the HIV change. And that makes it difficult for the immune system to cope. Or even because of the diversity of the HIV, it makes it difficult to design a vaccine.
HIV killed 650,000 people in 2021 and 40 million since its discovery, according to the most recent available data. The vast majority are women and unprotected adolescents in sub-Saharan Africa. The globally relevant AIDS vaccine, Europe-Africa Trials Partnership GREAT, is also carrying out vaccine trials in Uganda and Kenya.
The study team calls it the killer T-cell vaccine strategy. By simulating and enhancing T-cells, the component of the immune system that will fight the HIV virus on entry and prevent infection, the vaccine targets the highly conserved regions of the HIV virus.
An HIV vaccine will definitely be of very good value to the population in Lusaka, let alone the Zambians. Yes, and the world at large.
Results from the ongoing trials involving 3 countries report a participant retention rate of 100% and adherence to vaccination and follow-up visits exceeding 95%. Fungisai Maronga, Africa Matters, Lusaka, Zambia.
To the Gambia now, where Muslims are observing Ramadan, which is one of the pillars of Islam. It is one of the most important months in the Islamic calendar that's marked by a period of fasting. Muslims are also expected to help the poor and those less fortunate. Now let's turn to Maimuna in the Gambia. Maimuna, I understand giving during Ramadan isn't new to Gambian Muslims, but it's causing a bit of controversy this time around.
That's right. And I've been finding out how a cultural practice that dates back hundreds of years has become a burden for Gambian Muslims in Banjul during Ramadan. It is the holy month of Ramadan, and Muslims celebrate the month with joy, believing their good deed will be rewarded. In the Gambia, it is not always easy to distinguish between culture and religion. Gambian Muslims look forward to receiving gifts from their in-laws during Ramadan. Many go to the great land to fulfill this cultural practice that has crept into Islam or risk losing respect. Our source says it brings families together and should be maintained.
These hampers are prepared during Ramadan. It is part of our culture and a way of showing affection toward your in-law and sister-in-law. When they receive these gifts, they are happy, mashallah.
Saving for buying and preparing these gift hampers for the in-laws, like this ones, can take several weeks. They can cost between $70 and $200. They are usually presented towards the end of Ramadan. Some scholars say it has defeated the purpose of alms giving according to Islam. Charity should be voluntary and based on financial strength. But some recipients of alms feel pressure to give gifts to their spouse's family.
Alms giving is one of the pillars of Islam. In fact, they should be a recipient of givers according to the dictates of the religion, that is, sharing with the poor and the needy. If one is giving out charity in Islam, it should be for the sake of Allah. Islam does not teach us to seek appraisals from giving charity. It is not an obligation in Islam to give these gifts to your in-laws during Ramadan.
Like many other cultural practices, this one is also a hotly debated issue.
Personally, I really welcome the idea of giving hampers and cars during Ramadan to our in-laws. It's also bringing unity within ourselves, and it's part of our traditions, and it also help to make sure that we maintain the peace and unity within ourselves. And I recommend or recognize that we should maintain this giving out hampers and cars during Ramadan.
In my point of view, this causes more problems in marriages. To an extent, like a wife will go to her husband to ask for cash when the husband is not financially stable. So it causes a lot in our homes, as we can see. In my point of view, like, we should give it to the needy ones instead.
While some might smile politely and give graciously, some will have to dig deep into their pockets, ending up depriving their own families. Maimuna Ba, Africa Matters, Banjul, the Gambia.
Still talking about giving, there's been a shortfall in donor funding as aid agencies struggle to keep up with demand in places like Uganda, which hosts over 800,000 South Sudanese refugees. The UN says more than 339 million people around the world are in need of aid supplies this year as they battle an unprecedented number of global crises driven by conflict, disease and climate change. Taiba Aydin has more.
Each crisis does further damage, making recovery more and more difficult. The war in Ukraine, earthquakes in Turkey and drought in East Africa means less food aid is available for refugees in Uganda, like Susan Konga from South Sudan.
We are already aware, they already told us that they are going to give food according to categories. Not everyone will get food. But I plead to them, they should at least give food for everyone, since we are not yet stable.
According to the UN, Uganda hosts more than 1.4 million refugees from South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and other countries in the region. And underfunding is making it difficult to keep up with demand.
Donors are having to make very difficult decisions because the needs are enormous globally. We, of course, have known for some time about the impact of the war in Ukraine. Earlier this year, we had the earthquake in Turkey and Syria. But as far as Uganda is concerned, we're not only competing for visibility on a global scale, we're competing for visibility in the region as well.
By September last year, donors gave $360 million to support refugees in Uganda. But they are still facing a funding shortage of over 50% this year. To manage the shortage, the World Food Programme is dividing refugees into categories.
There cannot be resilience if you do not receive emergency support when you're hit by crisis. But these people have been able to link into livelihood interventions, to work with our various partners and be able to stand on their own and be sustainable. And this is the third category that we shall be supporting and winning of food assistance.
Susan Konga is a single mother living in a refugee camp in northern Uganda. And she is considered lucky to have a small garden near her thatched home. But the change in WFP policy has made it more difficult for her to survive.
I have children, of course, that I'm paying in school. So if I can sustain on myself alone, will the food be enough that I can cultivate to eat and sell part of it to sustain my children? It cannot.
The more global crises there are, the less money there is to go around, leaving the already vulnerable at even greater risk. Taiba Aydin, Africa Matters.
Meanwhile, South Sudanese who have opted to stay in their home country are facing a different challenge. The world's youngest country is one of the most vulnerable to climate change. As its population recovers from a devastating war, 4 years of flooding has exacerbated a desperate food crisis, which the UN says is affecting roughly 2/3 of its citizens. Bushra Gupta explains.
Livelihoods lost to climate change. Two-thirds of South Sudan is now a swamp after 4 years of flooding. The most dramatically affected city, Bentiu, has literally become an island.
There's no record of Bentiu being flooded like it has been for the last 2.5 or 3 years. So this is something that is unique, the interaction between the different systems.
Even though it has not rained for months, record-breaking rainfall has split over from the White Nile and caused flooding in the country's arable land further downstream.
If the flooding is over, we can resume our farming practices. At the moment, we only survive on activities like fishing and collection of water lilies.
The chest-deep water has left more than 7.7 million people without enough to eat.
When children wake up in the morning, they start crying looking for something to eat, but there is no food.
South Sudan was already facing a civil war before the floods hit. And the United Nations says they affected almost 1 million people, or nearly a tenth of the total population last year.
We feel like we are being made to suffer throughout, because after a fierce civil war, here comes the raging floods. How can we comprehend all these? We are here as people who are just in some impoverished island because we have nowhere to go. Wherever you try to go is the same, flooding.
South Sudanese have had to endure natural and man-made disaster for decades. But many here say they are now in uncharted waters. Büşra Göktaş, Africa Matters.
To Kenya now, where some cat farmers are having to find alternative sources of income. Cat is a flowering plant that's native to eastern and southern Africa. Chewing its leaves and stalks has a stimulant effect, and it's been grown and consumed in the region for centuries. But the World Health Organization says chewing cat can lead to dangerous addiction, and several countries have now deemed it illegal. And that's affecting farmers that grow the crop, as Rahul Radhakrishnan reports.
High up on the slopes of Mount Kenya, the farmers of Meru are growing a crop that's always in high demand. Cat trees cover the region, and many farmers like Adesewa have continued producing the age-old moneymaker, even as the international market has dried up.
People have a negative attitude and opinion towards khat, even though it is not harmful. It's just a stimulant, like any other, similar to coffee and tea. When you chew khat, you can work for a long time without getting tired.
Khat contains the stimulant cathinone, which gives the user a sense of euphoria and excitement when they chew the plant. It is classified as a drug in Kenya, but is still legal. However, it's banned in the US, much of Europe, and the UK, where it's deemed a Class C drug. And with climate change adding to their production woes, some farmers are trying to find another income stream.
When I saw that the UK and Somalia had banned khat, yet I had not planted any other crop, I chose to begin planting sunflowers. I found an advantage in sunflowers as it allows me to feed my animals. When I make some money from it, I pay for school fees and use the remainder to buy food. I've done this because there's no alternative and my piece of land is small.
Khat sellers still do a roaring trade at this market in Nairobi. In Kenya alone, the plant brings in an estimated $400,000 a day. But when export bans were imposed in 2014, it cost the local industry millions.
We used to export khat to places like London, Australia, Yemen, and Israel. We would take care of our farms well with hopes of getting a good harvest and making money. However, now that these markets have been closed, our efforts to take care of our farms are futile, as there are no markets to take our good harvests to.
Despite being commonly consumed in the region, it was the UK ban that sparked the export bans that are currently in place.
Due to pressure from some lobbying groups, who claimed that the Mira twigs and the banana fibers were dirtifying and polluting the UK. Then they put pressure on the government to ban it. So it was not banned because it was a drug. It's because there were other reasons.
Khat is mentioned in literature that dates as far back as the 11th century, and it's believed that millions still use it daily. But the pressures of its illegal status, climate change, and economic demands may be putting its future in doubt. Rahul Radhakrishnan, Africa Matters.
And this week, we're profiling the city called Zambia. It is in southern Malawi. The city lies on a unique plateau, a great slab of mountain, almost 2 kilometers high, and is surrounded by forests and farmland. Take a look. Thank you for watching the show this week. Kindly share your thoughts and suggestions about the stories on this episode or ideas on what you would like us to cover on Twitter using the hashtag Africa Matters. Feel free to reach out to me on my personal handle at Adesewa Josh. You can watch this episode and more on YouTube. Just search Africa Matters TRT World. Like, comment, and share. Thanks again for watching. See you next week.